Okay, so I'm recording. So if you're in the first section of this class, you're welcome to just kind of put me over in a corner and start doing your thing. A couple of people or somebody had a question. Who was it that had that question? I'm trying to remember now. Was it?
Could you go over putting files into my video files into my?
Yeah, it was Jeremy, wasn't it? There we go. Yeah. So yeah, I have that set up. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll start with that, and then I will jump into talking about plugins, or not plugins, props. So you remember this embarrassing list of video reference that we talked about last class period, right? This is the one where I'm being held at gunpoint, right? And so more than likely what you have is something similar to this. Like this is, I think, 4 minutes of video. At one point, one of my office mates walks by. That's Greg right there, walking by, scratching. That's somebody else coming in. So, so, um, so this is me in the multi-purpose room at Firaxis. And as you see, I just shoot the same line over and over again, which is, please, you don't understand, I have to get to the others. And then at the end of that, there was a gun click, like I'm being held at gunpoint in this while I'm trying to run away. So did a whole bunch of takes again. The next step for this is figuring out which take you want, right? So just dragging this into Premiere. I know you all are probably, you've at least used Premiere, right? Doesn't mean that you're super comfortable in it. We're not going to do anything too major, but recognize that you don't always have to have just one take, right? I'll show you really quick. I have this one that is this part of the take at this point, and then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I cut it right there. If you see that little jump in the cut, and use the second half of another take, right? So you can do whatever you want to in Premiere, at whatever level you need to adjust your video reference. I've seen people who have, put like another little video reference up in the top corner of like a certain section, or they've done like these split videos where they're side by side. But recognize what we're getting ready to do. You can import half a dozen of these into Premiere if you want it, or into Maya if you wanted to, as just multiple planes, right? So I drag this onto my timeline. You can use whatever editing technique you need to. Like some people, instead of just dragging it straight to their timeline, drag it up here to the source. They would find their in and their out point, right? And if you've never done this way, this is a way of working it. I'll show you.
I have to get to the others, please. You don't understand. I have to get to the others, please. You don't understand. I have to get to the others, please.
So what I did is I just clicked this in point and this marked the out point on each of those, like where I wanted it to start, where I wanted it to end. And then after you've done that, you can just plop that into your timeline. The other way of doing that, of course, is just to drag the entire clip into your timeline. I think for that to work, you have to do this entire clip into your timeline. And then you can trim it in here, which will allow me to go ahead and unlink that audio and delete it. Let me do that slower so you can see that. If you right click on this, unlink, you can get rid of the audio. You don't have to. I just do that because it's not going to export the audio anyway. And then I can go through here and watch it and find the take that I like. And so I actually, there's a lot of cool motions I do closer to the end. A lot of times my favorite take is my last take. So let's watch that one and see. So I think what I was doing there is trying to get that little response there, like that little twitch right at the end. All right. So we'll find the clip I want. Let's do. I think it's this one. Yeah, right there. So I'll start there. I can also drag my timeline this way, find the end of it, get to there. You can use your little razor or whatever to cut it. You know all the basics of Premiere, right? So I'm just finding the section that I want. take this all the way to the beginning, and I'm going to go make sure this is selected. Go File, Export, Media, and I want to set my format to JPEG. You can also do PNG if you want to, but JPEG works. And then this part's actually really important. You see right now that the output name of these JPEGs are MVI1848. Well, it's going to name it that, and then it's going to add another number at the end of it that is the frame number, right? So it'll be 1848 01, 1848 02, 1848 03, right? Well, this number at the end of your file is how Maya knows where to put that on your timeline, right? It's counting that as your frame number. And so if I left this right now like this is, it would put this on frame number 184,801, 148,802, right? That's not really where you want it. So I'm just going to rename this, and I'm just going to call it, let's find us a place to put this to. I will call this please underscore, because that's what she starts the line with, right? Hit save. And now here's the other part that's really important. If you scroll down here, this frame rate is grayed out because it's going to export it as the sequence, and it's going to export it as the same as the source, right? Well, right now I recorded this at 30 frames a second, but in Maya, I'm going to be animating at 24, which means my timing wouldn't line up with my audio if I did that. So I'm going to uncheck that and make sure I'm exporting out at 24. And what that's going to do is it's going to slice that 30 frame a second clip into 24 frames per second images, right? It's really just going to drop a couple frames every now and then. So once I have this, I'm going to hit export. It's going to export all of those images. Let's do a new. Onto my desktop, into this images folder, and you'll see what I have now is an image for every frame of the animation. Now, I recorded this a long time ago. So this is a different image size. This is not 1920 by 1080, right? If I right click on one of the images and go to properties and then go to details, you can see that it's 640 by 480, right? Now I just need that proportion, right? It could be 64 by 48, or it could be 6.4 by 4.8, or it could be 640 by 480, right? But in Maya, when I'm ready to do this reference, all I have to do is make a plane in here, and I'll go ahead and just scale this up so I can start to see the plane. And I need to make sure that somewhere in this scale, the X and the Z line up with that, right? So again, I could do 6.4 by 4.8, and that gives me the right proportions, or I could do 64 by 48, or again, I could do 640 by 480, right? Either way, it's giving me the same proportions of the image I need. That way my image isn't squashed. You can eyeball this if you really want to, but it's so easy to get it right, so like, why? And then I'm just going to assign a new material to this. This is important because by default, that plane is just going to have the default Lambert texture on it. And if you apply a texture to that, you're going to get that image on everything that has the default Lambert texture. I'll just go ahead and create a new Lambert just because this is not something I'm going to render or anything like that. And in my color section, I will go to File, and I'm going to choose that first image in that sequence, right? And you can see that they're numbered 000001. That first image is just the first image in the sequence, right? And it's going to plop it onto there, right? And you'll see that the name that it's looking for right here in the file is please_00, right? Now, if I click this Use Image Sequence button, watch that change. So now it's looking for please_F. And that F represents the frame, right? So it's going to basically plug in a number in here depending on which frame I'm on, right? And so if I'm on frame 5, it's going to look for please underscore 005, right? And so that means when I scrub here, you'll see the animation playback in real time. And so now this is just an animated texture on this. I can hold down J to rotate that 90 degrees. And then if I'm scaling this uniformly, I can place this anywhere I want to be a reference to my animation, right? I can put it here. I could even put it way off camera or way off scene and create a new camera that's just looking at that. That way I could tear it off and put it in another, on another screen. So I think I just got a chat question here. Okay, gotcha, thank you. Okay, so this is a very beneficial way of working. There's also a lot of other tools that we could use this for, right? This is basically an animated texture, right? If you need a TV screen in your scene, you can do this with, with that. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. You can make a movie your color, but what I've recognized is that when you do that, when you apply this to a movie instead of an image sequence, because like if you go to look, like you can look for a type of movie in here, like a MOV or an MP4. Your playback's actually really slow, right? When you scrub back and forth, it chugs a little bit. It's not very smooth. Using this image sequence option really helps make it go smoother. So, any questions on that before we move on?
Nope.
All right.
Thank you.
Anytime. So, again, I will reiterate, you can have multiple planes in there. There's nothing that says, you just have that one. You could have, 3 or 4 different reference clips in there that you line up and use those to inform different parts of your animation, right? Maybe you shoot reference just for what your hand does, right? And then you have a hand one floating in there. Okay. So one of the things that came up last class when we were talking about additional lectures that I could sort of pepper in here that are kind of smaller was working with props and constraints. And I wanted to do like a quick, relatively short, let's see. I think I'm already recording. Yeah. Thank you though. I appreciate people having my back on that one, because I do often miss that. So what I'm going to look at here is an example of how to get a weapon or any sort of prop. Like you're all going to run into this most likely in project number 3 when we get into pantomime acting, because it's usually about a character reacting to something, and a lot of times it's like they're opening a Christmas present, they're opening a door, right? All of those things that they have to grab something and interact with it, right? So before we can get too far into this, we have to recognize that this is very innately locked to the idea of FK and IK, right? And you all are pretty familiar, hopefully pretty familiar with FK. FK is when we look at the largest mass, right, the chest. The chest is a parent of the upper arm. The upper arm is a child of the lower arm. The hand is a child of the lower arm, right? And so it's this downward hierarchy system, right? That the larger masses affect the lower masses, right? And so when I rotate this, the upper arm is affected by the spine moving. When I rotate the shoulder, the elbow is affected. When I rotate the elbow, the hand is affected, right? And the hand here at the end, if I rotate the hand, that doesn't affect the shoulder at all, right? That's FK. FK stands for forward kinematics, okay? I know that it feels like there has to be a better naming system for that. But basically forward meaning it's progressing forward down the hierarchy, or progressing down the hierarchy system, right? It's progressing in the direction you would have thought it would, right? IK is when that works backwards, right? And really what we're trying to figure out is like, how does this whole arm system bend in order to get into a specific pose like this, right? And you see that when it's an FK, the way I have to get it in that pose is I rotate down the hierarchy. I start at the highest point to get the shoulder in place. I get the elbow in place, and then I can put the hand where I want it to be, right? Inverse and that's how I get this bend in the arm, is by going forward down the hierarchy to get this to affect all of those. IK is when we take the end of that system, the hand, right, and I can just move it so the end effector changes the way this hierarchy is lines up, right? And so most character rigs are going to have the option to either be FK or IK. And in this case, we can switch between that with this little controller right here, right? FK, IK switch. A lot of times this is a slider, right? This is not an on or an off. It's a proportion of one or the other, right? And so right now, though, this one is an on and off. So that means it's either one or the other, right? In this case. But in a lot of rigs, it'll be like you can have 50% of one, 50% of the other, and you can blend in and out of those. So I'll show you what happens, though, if I put my arm, this is how IK works, is I have this end effector now for the hand. I can grab that, and I can move that wherever I want to, and the elbow bends, right? And then the direction the elbow is aimed is just based off of this aim target that we have here, right? And so to get my character's hand in a position, I can put it like this, right? It's way faster to pose, but it does have some issues, right? And so we will be talking a little bit more about how to work with FK and IK a little later in this semester, but recognize that both of those are here, and here's what's going on and why this isn't always the best solution. Like, the reason to use IK is if I need that hand to stay locked in a place, right? I need my character to look like they're pressing their hand against the window while they're like looking into stuff, right? That hand's end location is the priority, right? That is not going to change, and it makes the hand feel like it can be locked to an object, right? And in FK, oh wait, this does have a little bit of a slider to it. There we go. I was wrong. I thought it's just a really fast transition. In FK, the hand's like location isn't as important as the thing that is affecting it, right? It's how the hand would react to the chest moving, right? And so when I move the chest, then the hand is going to react by following along with it. So recognize that what we have here is one arm that is blending in between either being an FK or being an IK, right? And so that means I can be halfway in between there, like 0.5, and you'll see that it's kind of aligning and it's kind of affecting, right? So that's actually really hard to control specifically when you have it like blend halfway through. What that's really for is so you can change your character being an FK at one point of the animation and blend that into IK. And so what I'll do is a little bit later, once we get into the animation for pantomime, I'll do a quick little demo of how to switch in between FK and IK for a shot, right? But this is very intricately locked to, or innately locked to the idea of using a prop, right? Because the thing that is going to use the prop is usually your hand or your leg or your head or like one of these extremities that has an FK or an IK option. And so right now I'm going to, just for this first piece, I'm going to go ahead and put my character in FK, and I'm going to go ahead and zero these back out so we can have our character kind of in the bind pose. And I'll go ahead and fix the spine and stuff too. I'm sure I messed a whole bunch of stuff up here. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Now what I've done is I've brought a sword in here. Actually, we'll go ahead and fix the IK hand too, right? No, let's go ahead and leave the IK hand like that. That's fine. So what I have here is this sword. All right. I just downloaded this model from Turbo Squid, and I resized it and I put it at the origin because a lot of what we're going to need to do, I want to keep the values pretty clean, right? So actually what I want to do just temporarily, just to get it out of the way, is I want to move my character over here. I'll bring it back to the origin here in a second. So when we talk about constraints, there are problems with constraints. How many of you have not taken technical direction yet? Anybody? Can't see if anybody's raising their hand or anything. If you haven't taken technical direction, like constraints get a little more clearer. Okay, yeah, you're in it right now. Sandra's in it right now. Okay, so a couple people are in it right now. You're going to be running through some of these concepts in there too, right? So the concept with a constraint is that something else, it's kind of like parenting it without having to mess up the hierarchy, right? So I'll show you really briefly here. If I wanted this cube to affect this sword, right? Obviously we know that I could drag this sword underneath the cube, right? And now when I rotate the cube, the sword will go with it, right? But the problem with that is I had to pull the sword out of its hierarchy and put it as a child of this for that to work. And there are times when that's just not something you can do. But you still want things to affect other things. So a constraint is just that. If I select the P cube, I select the sword, my constraints are usually under animation or rigging, or constrain. And we got a whole bunch of different kinds, right? Got parent, orient, and point. Parent is going to be a translate and a rotate constraint. Point is just a translate constraint, which means the angle of it will be different. And then orient is just a rotate constraint. So I'll do these really quick to show you. Right? If I select the box, choose the sword, and do parent constraint, you'll see now that the sword is affecting the translates and the rotates, or the box is affecting the translates and the rotates of the sword. That order of selection is important as well. All right, we'll talk about that. So now if I move this box, the sword moves with it. If I rotate this box, the sword rotates the same way it would have if we would have parented it, right? And the only thing that changed in the hierarchy is now the sword has a new child. It's this parent constraint node, right? To get rid of this constraint, I just have to delete that node. To show you quickly what a point constraint does, if I hit point, now my box totally controls everything about the translation. In fact, if I choose the translation of the box, you'll see translate X is 0.868. If I choose the sword, 0.868, right? So it's exactly. If I wanted to keep that offset in between them, I just undid that a couple times. When I do my point constraint, there's an option in here to maintain that offset between them. And so again, whatever I do, it does it. But recognize it's only affecting the translates. So if I rotate this box, the sword doesn't do anything, right? So we get that back down here. I'll just delete that constraint again. And again, the orient constraint does just the rotates, right? If I select those two, orient. So now whenever I move this box, nothing happens. But if I rotate this box, the sword rotates with it too. Okay, and you'll notice anytime when you get a color next to a value, that means in your channel box, that means something else is controlling that value, right? The rotation of this box being that number forces the rotation of this sword to be that number, right? So it's aligning to it perfectly at a 1-to-1. So let's back up again and get rid of that constraint. So let's go ahead and do a parent constraint. Again, the order in which you select these is you pick the parent first, hold shift, pick the child, and do parent. And so you'll notice what happens here. The thing that's a little annoying about this is, let's say this is a hand or something that is driving this sword, right? I can animate that. Put a couple of keyframes on this driver, right? Over to here, and you'll see that all that's working great, right? Now here comes the problem. What if I did want this to be the hand, right? Well, the sword's too far away from the hand, right? And so if I wanted the sword to be closer to that box after I've made this constraint, all of the translates and rotates on this sword are being controlled by that box. So if I change any of these, move it over to here, right? As soon as I hit play, it's just going to snap back, right? Because these values are being controlled by that constraint. Even worse, if I'm like, well, all I have to do is set a keyframe on it, then I'm giving it conflicting information. I'm telling it, I want this box to control the translates and rotates with the constraint, but then I move it over here and I hit S, and I'm telling it something different now. I'm telling it, I want the keyframes to control its location. And so now it's broken. Now the constraint doesn't work at all, right? Something you'll notice is all of these channels changed colors. Now I get this green value here, this red value here, and I get this annoying new value at the bottom here called blend parent 1, right? Blend parent 1 is basically saying, you've given me conflicting information. Which do you want me to pay attention to? Do you want me to pay attention to the keyframes, or do you want me to pay attention to the constraint, right? And so this has a use, right? If it's set to 0, it's going to pay attention to the keyframes. If it's set to 1, it's going to pay attention to the constraint, right? And so there's totally a use for that. It's just not props, right? That's actually really a pain in the butt to just dig through all of that stuff to try to fix, like, when is your character holding the sword? When is the character not holding the sword? All of that is really where the problems come from in setting up some sort of prop for using this. So I'm going to back up before I set those keyframes on it, right? But while I still have this animation on the sword, and show you another way that I could have done this. Actually, let's go ahead and zero that back out on the rotation. All right. Oh, yeah. So I'll show you another way I could have done this. I'm going to go back to 1 where I set up my constraint, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete that constraint. Right now, my box still has the animation on it, but it's not constrained to the sword. The really easy method of being able to adjust where that sword is and still follow the constraint is just to make the sword a child of something, right? So if I did Control G, now the sword is in a group, right? And I can call this sword group. And the box still isn't affecting it, but you'll recognize the sword has a pivot point with translates and rotates on it, and the sword group also has a pivot point with translates and rotates on it. Translates and rotates. I think I'm saying that right. So what that means is I could instead do my constraint to that group, right? If I select the P cube one, select the group, do constrain. I already got it open here. And I'll do that parent constraint, right? So now what's happening is the group is what is being controlled. The translates, the rotates, the scale, or the translates and rotates of the group are, but the sword has no values on it, right? So it's still going to be controlled, but within that group, I can move this sword wherever I need to. Right? So I could do like this, and it's going to be like that. Right? So that's the easiest first step when making some form of prop, is that you need the ability, like if this sword were in somebody's hand, you don't always need it locked exactly in one orientation in their hand, right? It may need to wiggle around in their hand some, or they may want to twirl it, right? Like, who knows what it's going to do? You need some ability to set some additional controls on a prop, right? Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So I'm going to undo all of that and just go ahead and delete that cube and that group. So we're back to what we had before, which was this bony rig and this sword, right? So that means, like, just to make this easier on us, I'm going to go ahead and create a small rig for our sword, right? Now we can do this with anything we want to. Like, a lot of people will want to use like a circle, right? A nerve circle to make your control for it. That's actually pretty convenient. The other thing you could use for something like this is you could create a locator, which is just this little tick mark that doesn't render, but it's basically a group that you can see, is basically what it is. Either of these will work. I just need to be able to see the location of something, right? I'll go ahead and use the sword, or go ahead and use the circle, just because that's easy to grab, right? And the real question here is, if this is going to be the control for this sword, I need to figure out where I want this to be able to move from, right? If my character were twirling this sword in their hand, would the pivot point be here? Would it be down here? Would it be up at the tip of the sword, right? I'm probably going to put it just like right about here, recognizing that there's probably not a perfect answer for this, right? And then I'm going to make sure that my values are clean on here, edit, delete by type, history, right? And I'll call this sword, wait, what's happening? My computer is acting strange. My keyboard, what is happening? Huh. Acting really strange. Wait, I wonder if I've pulled my keyboards too tight here. See if that fixed anything. Oh, wait. Okay. No, that's not working either. I messed up my keyboard. Sometimes keys get stuck. Huh. Let's see if this is happening just in Maya. Sorry about this, y'all. This is weird. Yep, it's just in Maya. Let's try this really quick. File, save scene as. It's crazy. What? Oh, it wants me to save as an MA. File, save scene as. If you ever get that, it can't change the file format. I'm trying to save as an MB. It just wants me to save as an MA. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and close Maya and reopen it. I'm also going to close down Premiere because Premiere is a virus. Okay. See if that fixed it. Sorry, it wouldn't be digital media if there wasn't a technical glitch. You know what happens sometimes is really weird, is that Maya will read a key, like a keyboard key, as being pressed, even though it's not. And I think that might have been what was happening. Let's see. Open scene. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to call this sword GRP for sword group. Right? Or sword, let's do sword CTRL. And that's sword control, right? And you'll see that my pivot point for that is there. One of the other things I'm going to do just so I have it is I'm going to go ahead and group that sword control. Control G. And I'll call that sword control underscore group, right? So when I have that, now I have this group that I can constrain something to, and this sword control, oh, come on. Back up a step. Sorry, apparently I forgot to freeze the transformations on that. So I renamed it, but I do need to go modify, freeze transformations, and then I can do the group. Sword CTRL underscore group. Okay, so we got that, right? And so, again, none of this is actually controlling the sword yet, right? If I'm moving this around, it's not controlling anything. So a couple ways I could do this, of course. I could put the sword underneath the control, or I could click on the sword control, click on the sword, and hit constrain. I get this parent there, right? And so that means now I can animate the sword wherever I want to, right? And I have this group still yet above this that I could parent to things, right? Or parent constrain to things. So let's go ahead and move our character back here, and I'll show you sort of how that works. I would go ahead and sort of maybe use the group to align this to the hand a little bit. I'll show you a quick trick to that. If I select the group and then I select this control here, the hand control, right, I can then go to modify match transformations, and I can match the translation of that object, right? I could also do modify match transformations and match the rotation, right? That's not really helping me very much, but really this is just to get me a little closer. Oh, I just need the sword control. I just need to be able to get this sword placed in a place that feels like it's close to the character's hand as a starting point. Right. Let's say, make that more like 90 there. Right. So that's feeling pretty good. Right. That's pretty close to a good place to start. Right. And then what I can do is I can go from this character's hand control, right, which is now not doing anything, right, to the sword. I can select the character's hand control and then select the sword group, and I can do a parent constraint there, right? So the point of that now is that when I move the character's hand, it's affecting this group, but I still have some leverage in here to adjust where the sword is placed. Right? I could slide it up and down in my character's hand. I could twist it this way. All of that stuff is still, I still have a level of control for this sword to be in the character's hand. Right? So then I can just sort of get my character's hands curled around this a little better. And so now I got the sword, my character's hand, and I can still animate that sword doing a little wiggle in there if I need to, or get it into whatever pose I needed to, right? Okay, everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
There's two more complications that we might want to deal with here, right? I'll start. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to zero out this hand. Actually, I'm just going to undo a few times so I can get my character's hand back to where it was, where we constrained it. All right, just so I have this, right? There we go. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and save this just so I have it. Increment and save. Okay. So one of the complications is, what if I need both hands on the prop, right? What if I needed this character to be like holding the sword by the handle in one hand, but then I need them to hold on to the blade with the other hand, right? Well, that's kind of hard because what I have right now is this FK chain controlling everything about this sword, right? And if I need this other FK chain to follow it, that's a pain in the butt, right? So to like try to manually get that to align would be almost impossible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to backtrack just a little bit here. And under this sword control, just so this will follow it a little bit better, I'm going to get me another little locator in there just so I can see a point on the sword, right? So let's just go ahead and create a locator. My locator's down here on the floor just so I can get it up here next to the sword. I got the locator selected. Select the control. I'll do that modify, match transformations, and match my translates. And I'll go ahead and match my rotates too. Why not? And then I can just move this out here onto the sword wherever I want to. So let's say I want the character to be holding the blade of the sword right about here, right? So now that I have this locator on here, I can just call this, I can call this whatever I want to. I'll call it blade hold. And so I use this term that you're gonna hear in other places called socket, right? This is something that's used in a game engine. It's just a node that you can attach things to, right? And so I'm going to call this blade hold socket, right? And I'm going to parent that underneath my sword control. So that means now whatever I do with my sword or my character's arm, that little socket's going to go with it, right? And so the point of that is that I can now go over here to my character's hand, and I can switch this character's arm to IK, right? And remember, IK is the thing that stays locked in place wherever we put it, right? I do want to point out something to you. Right now, this sword is parented to my character's left FK arm, right? If I were to switch to my IK arm right now, like whatever I do with my IK arm is not even affecting that sword, right? It's my FK arm that's driving the sword. Right? And so this is part of what you have to consider in your planning. You know, if your character is running with like a machine gun, right? Probably the gun that is on the hand that's on the trigger is the hand that's going to do most of the driving of everything. Whereas the hand that's up on the stock or I don't know parts of guns, up on the closer to the end of the barrel, that's going to be one that's just kind of following along, right? And so whatever it is that's following along, in this case, I want it to feel like this hand here is just sort of following along with wherever the blade goes, right? Well, I'm going to grab my IK hand, and I'm going to move it over here close to this part of the blade, right? Bear with me, we'll clean it up more later. Now, recognize we'd have this issue. I think you're probably seeing where I'm going with this, is that I could grab this locator, I could grab this hand, and I could do a parent constraint. And now wherever I move this, right, that character's arm goes with it, right? One of the issues with that, though, is now I can't set any keyframes on this character's IK hand because the constraint is controlling it. There's a couple of things we could do to address that. I went ahead and delete that constraint. If we look at this rig, sometimes rigs are set up with that in mind. Rigs are set up understanding that that is possible, or part of what may need to happen. And so with the hand selected, if you hold Shift and then click the plus sign next to Boney, it will expand everything going on in this rig, and you can track down where that hand control is. So it's right there. It's the R wrist IKC. And notice that right above it is a group, right? Currently that group is locked. So let's just try this and see if this works. What if I selected this locator and then that group and did constrain parent there? So now kind of works, but it seems like it was locked for a reason. I think it was locked because something else is already kind of controlling that. So I'm just going to undo that constraint I just made. Yeah, you can actually see the parent constraint right there that's driving it, right? So, so you're probably like, well, what do I do then? I'll still need to adjust that hand. Well, recognize this is parented under there, so it is adjustable, right? I can move this in here and line it up a little bit better. So I'll match my translations. Sure, that works. And then I can sort of get this lining up a little bit better to where I want that locator to be. Right. I recognize that it's messing up there. Just kind of bear with me for a second here. I can select this locator, select this hand, do that constrain parent, right? And so again, it's going to work now that the hand follows, and if I get this hand closer, it's going to follow along with it. But the problem is, again, I can't set keyframes on this, but I can set keyframes on this little locator I made, right? So this hand locator socket can now be the thing that I use as my pivot point, right? So again, let me go ahead and delete that locator on that so we can get this a little more sensible in the way it's lining up, because I would really want it to be like wherever the palm is. Right. Again, constrain parent. And so now if my character is like sitting here, he's admiring his sword, and you're wanting him to kind of move his hand sort of up and down the blade like he's testing the sharpness of it, I would animate this locator to get that motion, right? Down to here, right? And you'll see that it sort of aligns with the sword even if I'm moving this sword around, right? And so if I have a keyframe, starts there and goes over here, it's going to stay kind of aligned to the sword, right? Is that making sense? What I'm doing there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one prop issue that you may run into. The other prop issue is much more difficult, which is if you have a sword in one hand, you need to stick it in the ground, walk around for a second, and then pick it up with the other hand, and then toss it back to your other hand, right? It's the switching what is in control, right? The space switching of the prop. And to show that, I'm going to go back to the previous save that I had here, because that was a lot closer to where we were. And if you look at that, what I'd done is I had constrained this group to the sword, right? Or I constrained this group to the character's hand, right? And that works fine, but groups are invisible. So let's just go ahead and backtrack just a little bit more to where that group doesn't exist, and the sword control was back. On the ground, right? So we would go something like that, and the same with this, There we go. So when we were at this point, we were rigging the sword. Let's move my character just so I can see this. Oh, what is that? That's way off. How did that happen? Okay. Let's try this again. Create a new. There we go. Modify freeze transformations, and we will call this sword underscore CTRL. Right? Okay. So instead of worrying about a group on this, one of the things I could do is I could do this with locators, right? So let me show you this. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to make a whole bunch of locators here really quick. Create polygon primitive, no, I'm sorry, it's create locator, right? And I'm just going to make, let's do 4. So I'm just duplicating these all over the place. Wait, what did I just do? Duplicate it, and then duplicate it. All right. Let's name these really quick. We'll call this L hand socket. We'll call this R hand socket. We'll call this sword socket. No, let's not. Let's call this sword parent. And we'll call this world socket. Right? So, so this is this is sort of a the problem with this is like you could very easily come up with a method in which you could swap in and out of all of these things, right? This is something you probably go into in technical direction of blending in and out of the things that are controlling this. The problem with it is doing it while you're in the middle of animating a character doing a performance, right? And so what we could do is very quickly set up a very simple rig for switching in and out of these different spaces. So what I'm going to do is select that locator, select my control, modify. Please slow me down if anything is confusing on this. I'm going to match my translates, match my rotates, right? And you can barely see it, but that's where that locator is, the sword parent. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to parent my sword control underneath that sword parent. So I pretty much have the same setup I had earlier when I grouped it, except for now I can see my group. My group is this locator, right? And that's just for visual reference, so I can understand this a little better. Oh, give me a second to undo that. Before I do that, I'm going to modify freeze transformations just so it keeps it a little cleaner, and then I can parent my sword under sword parent, right? I'm just doing this so my numbers are always at 0 on these things. It just makes stuff work better. So my right hand socket over there, my left hand socket, my world socket, right? These are all of these different things that I can put in different places. Right? So I'll show you kind of quickly. Let's go right hand socket. I'll group that, right? I'll call this R hand socket group. I know that this is annoying to you watching me name everything. I promise you it makes future me less crazy. So I'll kind of do the same thing with this, Control G, a quick trick to do this. So I can copy that name and then just add group to the end. And so basically I'm just taking all of these sockets I made, and I'm grouping them to themselves so they have an extra node over top of them. Not sure I always even need that. Wait, what is that? I don't need that. There we go. So now all of these sockets that I've made have a group, and the reason for that is because now I can constrain them to the different hands, right? This is my character's right hand. Choose the right hand, choose this right hand socket group. Constrain, and we'll do parent, right? Same with the left hand socket group, parent, right? And then this world group, it's just for out here in the world, right? This is out here where everything's just kind of floating around, right? And so I don't need to parent it to anything. I probably didn't even need to group it. But recognize now what happens is if I move my right hand, my little socket over here is going to follow it, right? And so I could very quickly go in here and align this up to my right hand a little bit better. And I can put this socket out here in the area where the hand is, right? Now, sort of the same with this one. I could do left hand socket group, constrain, parent, and then I can just move this left hand socket and sort of line it up over there, rotate, put it to where I want it to be. Now, the reason this is a useful way of doing this is like now I have these sockets that are going to go wherever my hand goes, right? Those sockets can be moved around individually if they need to be, but the most important thing is these can be constrained. So let me just kind of go off to the side here and show you this trick, right? So with if I were to make these three objects, right? We'll call this A, B, and we'll call this C, right? So I have A, B, and C. If I wanted A to completely control C, we recognize that I can go A, C, and then do a parent constraint, right? And so now, no matter what I do with A, C will follow, right? But what if I did that again with B? What if I did B and C and did parent constraint? Well, now C is going to half follow A and half follow B, right? So both of them are kind of affecting it. And if I go over here to C, you'll see that I have these weights down here at the bottom. A weight 0, B weight 0, or B weight 1. And this is where I can change that. I can say, no, I don't want you to follow A anymore. I just want you to follow B for right now. And then later, I can go back and say, changed my mind. Now I want you to only follow A, and I don't want you to follow B anymore. All right? Does that make sense? So that's what we're going to do with these locators. Okay, we're going to select my my hand socket here, right? And I'm going to select my my sword parent. So I can choose hand socket, sword parent, and then under constraint, I can just do parent constraint, right? And so now, oh, that's funny. I never constrained the sword constraint to the sword. Here. And so now wherever I move my right hand, that socket right there is controlling where the sword is, right? I can do that again though. I can select the left socket. I can choose my sword parent. I can parent constrain that. And now they're both kind of affecting it, right? And I could do this world. So I got 3 of them affecting it now, right? So I got all of these 3 sockets that all kind of affect my sword. But what I can do now is on this sword parent, I can just say 0 to everything I don't want affecting it anymore, right? So if I only want this to be in my right hand, I can hit 0 on that. And now it's only going to be affected in my right hand. Now the reason these little locators are handy is because I can select one locator and the other. And again, I can use this modify match transformations to match my translations and my rotations, and it perfectly lines up with the socket that I have in my hand, right? And so I can adjust my sword to sort of, affect that. So that's why that's beneficial, is now this is completely in the right hand. Oh. Wait, what just happened? Oh, I see kind of what I did. So there are some things I can do to do this cleaner, which is like line it up to the to these constraints when I do it. The other thing I can do is I can just align this control to it as well. So I can select this, match my, nope, did I do it in the wrong order? This. What? I'm doing it backwards, sorry. Match translations, match rotations, right? And then it's lined up with it, and it's going to move around wherever I need it to, right? The other thing I could do if I wanted to make this a little cleaner is those parent constraints I created for this earlier, for the on the sword. If I go ahead and delete that, if I do this as a point constraint and an orient constraint, it will work very similar as a parent constraint, but there is one benefit to doing it that way, right? So watch this and you'll kind of see what that is. So if I select this hand, select this control, and I do a point constraint, and I uncheck that maintain offset and hit add, you'll see it automatically aligns it to it. And then I can also do an orient constraint, make sure maintain offset is turned off, and orient, and that sort of aligns it to it as well, right? Now again, I can do that again with this locator and the sword parent, point and an orient, right? And you'll see the sword is trying to kind of stay in between the two, right? But really the benefit to this is if I just turn off the left hand weight on the point and the orient to 0, then it perfectly lines up with my hand every time. Does that make sense? So if I do that again with the world and the sword parent, point and orient, and then again, I can turn off that world whenever I want to.
Can I ask a question, Greg?
Yes.
Can't you turn off the maintain offset and parent and get the same effect?
I think you can. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I'm trying to think if there's a reason not to do that.
I don't know. That's the way I did it in TD. I just can't remember.
Yeah, that actually may work. That may work fine too. Yeah, well, let's try it really quick and see. So again, let's go ahead and move my sword over here, and we'll just test it. Click that, parent. I kind of forget maintain offset is even in the parent one. Yeah, you're right. That works just fine. And And so parent that again. Parent that again. So this does make it a little easier because now all of those weights are on there. But here's the annoying part is I really don't want those weights there. Like that is still me having to dig into the rig while I'm animating. So I can very easily make this a control on my sword, right? I could just go in here and say modify and add a couple of attributes. And we could say, let's say, we'll say L hand, and I want to go ahead and limit that to 0 and 1. Add R hand, again, 0 and 1. And world, 0 and 1. Okay. And so now we have these 3 values here that we can just hook up to these 3 constraints, right? And of course, you probably remember how to do this. Windows, General Editor, and then, where's it at? Connection Editor, right? And what I'll do is I just select my sword control here, reload left, and I want to choose my constraint, my parent constraint for the sword, reload right, and I got these values here, and I want to choose my weights, I think it is. See if I can see those. So weights or targets? Yeah, these weights right here, right? So I'm going to line these up by name, left hand to left hand, right hand to right hand, world to world. Right? And really all this does now is it allows me to set the value of 1 to the hand that I want to control it, right? That's working? That seems weird. And the rotation of it for some reason. Did I just rotate this? Oh yeah, for some reason that's rotated 100 degrees. So we got that. And so this is really now this single control that I can animate if I want my right hand to suddenly have that sword, right? I do not know why that's lining up like that. There we go. Apparently I didn't. Apparently these hands are flipped when I aligned them, and so I think
it might be in the rigging that the wrists are flipped.
yeah, I think so. It's like you see my my Z pointed that way, my Z pointed that way. So I kind of expected that to work differently. It's easy to fix. I could actually just unconstrain this, rotate it 90 degrees, and it would line up. So and then the world option is if I wanted this to only be affected by the world, right? And so now neither of the arms are affecting it. Again, recognize that all of those locators are movable or alignable. So at least with my world socket or my sword socket here, it's always going to align with these, but so is the sword itself, right? So so that's one of the ways we can kind of visually see what's going on with it. And again, I can quickly get this in my character's right hand and start animating with it. So all of these are different things that you might want to do with a prop. Not something that every situation calls for, though, right? So what you really need to do is be thinking about what it is you actually need your prop for, right? Like obviously juggling is very complicated, right? And would require a lot of prop work. And really at some point you have to ask yourself, is whatever it is you're doing absolutely necessary to have a prop rig, right? Or is it, like juggling is one of those examples. Really I'm wanting to happen is I'm just needing to have the ball aligned to one of my hands for a few frames at a time, right? And so it may be that what you would do is you would keyframe the ball kind of in the hands, right? And you would animate the hands, doing what they needed to do. But then when it came time for them to actually look like they're locked to the hand, you could just use that match translation, match rotation for the few keyframes that you needed it to be perfectly aligned to the hand, right? There's actually a tool. Let's see, what is this called? Parent. Oh, I used to remember the name of it. Yeah, ZV Parent Master. So I'm going to go ahead and show this here. It's been around for ages. It's apparently since 2013. Yeah. And I feel like it's been around even longer than that because I used it before that. Has he updated it? So you have play on this and kind of see what it's doing. It's basically an animate align tool that like temporarily constrains stuff and then bakes out the keyframes on that constraint, and then really what you have is the impression that these things are aligned, but these things are constrained. They're just actually not, right? So this is a nice tool if you need to use it. ZV Parent Master. I'm sure there's probably other parent. Yeah, Maya multi-constraint. That's a tool. Anyway, but that's an okay one. Anything that you find that's called animate align. Animated align on ScriptSpot is also pretty much doing the same thing. Wait, ScriptSpot's 3D Studio Max. But basically what it's doing is it would align the location of an object over a series of frames and just bake that information in as keyframes on every frame, right? Okay, I know that was a lot to cover. Questions for me?
I don't have any particular.
I have a comment.
Okay.
When looking for something in the outliner,
Mm-hmm.
if you opened up if you did a shift open on, say, the rig of the body.
Yep.
Go ahead and do that. Now pick any part of the control.
Yep.
Now go over to the outliner and push F.
Yep. So I was going to say F will focus in on it as well. That's a pretty nice a nice tool. Something else it took me forever to learn this about the outliner. Like the outliner just feels like this giant list, and sometimes you're like, wait, here's the thing I need, but I also need to go get that other thing. There's a little little dotted line down here, and if you click that and raise that up, you have two outliners. And so you can scroll up and down on one and pick from the other. And
A shocked gasp.
Yeah, that's a really handy thing that took me 10 years to learn. So, that F thing is actually also very, very useful.
There's also an easy way to select all the controls for the rig. If you go up to show and limit it to NURBS.
So show objects.
Like NURBS objects.
Oh yeah, that is nice. Never really tried that. The weird thing is sometimes people will use NURB objects for something that's not a control. For example, spline IK in the spine may have a NURBS curve that's driving that. So you need to be a little careful with that, but in most cases you're right. So,
this rig does.
yeah, this doesn't. So you want to be careful not to be setting keyframes on that as well. Okay, can anybody see a situation where you don't think this rig would do what you needed it to do, or you have more questions about props? Because this was kind of impromptu on how we set it up or how I go about explaining it. But this rig is very much what I end up making for any prop rig that I need. And it just allows you to kind of adjust the placement. So, questions? All right. That means I'm a real good teacher. I'm going to go stop that thing. I recognize that for the people who are in this class the first time through, that might have just been a whole bunch of distracting noise. That's not something that you're actually working on. My mask is starting to rip at the bottom. You see that? I have to go get another one. I got one in my car. This may not be anything you need to use in the near future. Recognize like today's date, 1/28/21. That's when we're recording this. I'll be recording it for my next class too. There'll probably be a slightly more simplified, like I won't have as many hiccups in it because I worked all the hiccups out on you all. And so you can watch those if you, if you get like, a month down the road and you're like, oh wait, I need to use constraints for this. You can go back and check that out. So, all right. So outside of this lecture, anything else you all have questions about right now or need to chat about? Okay. Well, I am going to shut up then and let you all do your thing. You're welcome to hang around and ask questions and chat or do whatever, or you're welcome to close down Zoom a few minutes early if you need to. I love as soon as I say that, like a couple of names disappeared. Like their button was just hovering over the end meeting button.
I need permission.
No, y'all are fine. I totally get it. Head out. Have a great rest of the day. I'm looking forward. Remember, there is a milestone next class period where I'd like to kind of see the blocking pass of this. It's mainly just turn something in. It's a pass fail milestone, and so I'm looking forward to seeing it. So.
For us retaking, are our milestones the project due dates?
It can be. I mean, really, basically, it's just a show and tell day. Again, like it'll be like the circus type thing. I'm going to play through it really quick. So if you have some progress you'd like to show and get some quick feedback on, usually what I do on the milestone days is I will open them up, click through them pretty quickly, one at a time, and throw out any quick notes that I see. Or at least that's what we're going to try the first time. It may be, it's basically the equivalent of what you all would do in your group meetings, except I'm going to do it, right, for everybody. So anything you want to have looked at there. So recognize that if you're repeating the class, the number of projects or the number of exercises you have can be different than the first class. I haven't got the gradebook lined up specifically with that. It makes it easier if everybody has a milestone grade than two. So yeah, if you have some progress to show that day, it will probably work out better if the repeating class is just turning in milestones of some sort as well.
So there's not like a hard this is what I expect milestone.
Right,
it's more so just like give me something.
Yeah, let's see what your progress is so we can give you some notes. It's very easy for the first time through to say about this time you're probably getting close to blocking. But even with that, like if somebody comes in, they're like, I'm not quite finished with blocking, or oh, I went a little bit past blocking, like that's still fine. So
Okay.
Cool. All right, y'all. It was snowing earlier, but I think it quit. So.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
it was really heavy earlier.
Yeah.
My window's right there, so.
Is it still snowing there? You're out toward Gray, aren't you? Just trying to figure out what my drive home is going to look like. So. All right, cool.
I had. Oh wait, Glenn. Oh, I think Glenn was trying to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mute was just, I had the button wrong.
Oh, okay. I had a question about like portfolio presentation. Like I had this like, I don't know, straying thought that I'm confident other people have had. So like, what rig we use matter? Like, is there like a level of like, oh, I use this, so now my portfolio is seemingly less professional than if I use something, else?
No.
Okay.
You're the trickle of doubt in my head there.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say is, some rigs are good rigs, but ugly models, right?
Okay.
Or even mediocre rigs and ugly models. And recognize that no amount of awesome animation is going to make that model less ugly. And so like there's something that's like when the model looks really good, it also just helps your animation to look really good, right?
Yeah.
It just feels
Okay.
more finished and professional in that way. The other thing I would say is it's okay to have these in there, but recognize the connection you're drawing. Like there's a lot of rigs that have came out recently that's like
They're like
almost
licensed character rigs.
do it.
Are you talking about like the licensed character rigs? Like,
Right, like
yeah.
there's a new Buzz Lightyear rig out there. There's a
Mhm.
new, or I think there's a Woody and a Buzz Lightyear rig. There's a Tom and Jerry or a Tom rig out there, even though there's a Tom and Jerry movie coming out.
Yeah.
There's a Miles rig out there.
Yeah, and
Recognize
yeah,
that
because
by using those, you're drawing a connection in the viewer's head between that thing they really love and your work. So it better be good, right? Like a mediocre Woody animation impresses no one, right?
because
Um,
yeah.
it has to be killer. So that's a caution to. I think a lot of times people use those for almost like fan art reasons, and it's kind of the same reason that we would tell somebody who's doing illustration to not have exclusively fan art. You don't want to look like that you're just doing this because you're a fan of cartoons. Like
Yeah.
you need that extra level of professionalism on top of being a fan of cartoons. And so,
Yeah, because that's what I was asking. Because like for my whatchamacallit game for like my game set, I was looking into doing the link rig because it's really good for video games, and the way it has like these really convenient way that it handles props. I was just like, oh, I could have it, because what I was wanting to do is like, oh, well, I can have like the sword and bow be separate animations, and then I can have like a blend layer to blend both of them in. And that was my plan. But I was looking through all the rigs that I had last night, and I was just like, I don't know if I really want to like present myself as like, oh, he's using this link rig, and so like it may not be as professional than if I just use the default UE4 dummy, because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like, oh, I can just bring in the UE4 dummy
yeah,
and make animations for it,
I think
and
I think it would be fine to use the link rig. I don't. I think that really the thing with like it's not just that it's a licensed character. Like it's that you don't want it to. Like I don't know that people have a. Well, maybe this is just me because I haven't played as many of the games that a similar looking Link character would have been in, right? I'm not sure that people have like this image in their head that they're going to compare your animation to. If I'm wrong on that, correct me. Like I may just be unfamiliar with the games that that a similar rig was in. Like I don't know if that was which one that one was. But Woody from Toy Story is very different. Everybody has their like
yeah.
the way Woody runs or something from that movie that's like very clear in their head that they're going to compare it to. I think even like Spider-Verse, like the Miles Morales rig, I think you just have to be careful in like not disappointing someone, right? You want to make it clear that the thing you're doing is not just an homage to, like that it stands on its own merit as well. Right?
Yeah, so it's very much like a risk reward thing.
Right. Like I think the biggest mistake would be to get the Miles Morales rig and try to recreate one of the animations from Spider-Verse. Right? Because like there's no way you're going to live up to that, right? But what if you had it and you're having him fight like Doc Ock or even like another character that he's never fought in any of the current animated Spider-Verse games or movies, like then maybe it's a different then it's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and people will recognize that you're doing this just because you wanted to have a similarly styled animation. Still, though, I think whenever you're using a licensed character, you really want to make sure it looks good, right? Like
Okay.
you want them to be like, oh, if we happen to be working on a Spider-Man game, we could give him the Spider-Man rig and he could come up with something cool, right? It's kind of just showing that you're, I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Like when they came out with that Woody rig, I'm like, I am never opening that thing. Like that's not even going to let it on my computer. Like just in case, because I've always wanted to animate Woody, and I would not do it good enough, and like it would just be something that I would, I mean, again, like if you're doing it for fun, it's fine. Just recognize it's probably not. I wouldn't,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
too much mimicry of something.
Yeah. Cause I'm still kind of like iffy on it because I don't want to seem like I don't want my portfolio to look like, oh, here he is with all these like licensed lookalikes. And so like I don't want it to limit like the scope of what I want to do because it's not that, oh, I want Nintendo to hire me. That's not really what I'm trying to aim for. I'm trying to just be like, I can do like different styles of game animation.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think the Link rig is fine.
Okay.
I think even the Spider-Verse is fine. Stay away from the Toy Story rigs, I guess is what I would say. And I think the other version of that is don't animate anything from your favorite animated series, like in terms of audio.
Yeah.
I know that comes up a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
like if you really think you can top to Infinity and Beyond as it was originally done, like it just everybody has their it's in their head. It's iconic.
Yeah.
And people do that because they're a fan of that scene too, but it just doesn't end up benefiting them any in the demo reel. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
anytime. All right. Other questions? Yep. Okay. Cool. I'll be on there. So. Okay. Anything else out there in the internet world?
Are you familiar with a rig artist named Kiel Figgins?
Yeah, Keel Figgins. Yeah.
Yeah. Do they okay, I bought one of his rigs. And it seems a bit like the way the rig is set up seems a bit archaic and some of the features don't seem to work. Is that a Maya 2020 thing? Because I imagine these rigs were made in a very old version of Maya.
Yeah, he's been out there for a long time. I don't know. I've not used a lot of his rigs. The older ones, I was never a huge fan of the models he was using. So I don't know enough about the rigs. But I know he's recently made some more recent characters with some better models. And I know that he's like a serious rigging artist. Like I think he worked at ILM or something.
Yeah. He's a big name.
Yeah, but I've never really used any of them, and I think it kind of goes back and forth. I've heard some people who love them and some people who have not been huge fans. So
Yeah. I was having because I got a rig and I was just like, I might think about using this for my game Anim set. But then like I was having like weird troubles with exporting and I was just like, I'll probably just stick this to like being a Maya render and maybe not a UE4 render.
yeah. If you have one, I can help you dig through it and try to see if we can figure out how to export it.
All right, can I email you like the zip file?
Yeah, or if you want to swing by my office hours sometime, because
Okay.
I'll be honest, like my to-do list of stuff gets pretty long, and what ends up happening is those kinds of things, like could you open up this file and look at it for me? Like they get
lost.
pushed a little down the priority list from somebody who's like literally like knocking on my door. So and so I don't want it to get pushed too far back. So maybe sometime early next week we'll hop in and we can open it up and look at it there and just go through it during the office hours. So
Okay, yeah, sure.
cool. Awesome. Well, like I said, y'all are welcome to hang around. I know I guess we got like 10 minutes left, or you're welcome to hop out. And it was great talking to y'all. I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Greg. Have a good weekend.
You too. See ya.